Kore Mwapenduka and welcome to Africa Good Morning, the show that keeps you up to date with the latest news in Africa and beyond. My name is Glenn Rashipura, joined by Diana Master. Good morning, how are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well. You're looking pretty in blue.
Oh, thank you. I think every color is my color.
Oh, wow. Wow, I'm going to use that line.
Yeah, you should. I mean, it's all about hyping yourself up. If you don't, who will?
True,
exactly.
True.
Now let's get into what you can expect in today's broadcast. Lesotho MPs to discuss reclaiming parts of South Africa. At least 39 migrants dead in Mexico detention center fire. Oscar Pistorius up for parole in girlfriend's murder case. Stick around after the break. We get into our top stories.
Today is Thursday, the 30th of March, and here's your top stories. Lesotho MPs to discuss reclaiming parts of South Africa. Lesotho's parliament has debated a motion to claim huge swaths of territory from its much larger neighbor, South Africa. An opposition MP wants to declare Free State and parts of 4 other provinces Lesotho's territory. The people of Lesotho, called Basotho, lived in these areas until the 19th century when they were seized by Afrikaners, white South Africans. Many Basotho still live in South Africa, especially in Free State. The Sesotho language is one of South Africa's 11 official languages, spoken by about 4 million people in the country, as well as the 2 million inhabitants of Lesotho. It's time for what is ours to be returned to us, Tsepo Lifolo, the MP behind the motion, told Lesotho's parliament, speaking in Sesotho. History has a record of what was taken from our people and that people were killed in the process. It is time to correct that, he said. Parliament has adjourned until Thursday, when the debate will continue. In Mr. Lipolo's vision, Lesotho would grow from 30,000 square kilometers to around 240,000 square kilometers. He said that while this was an issue dating back many decades, he believed it was important to address in the present day because the land would help bring prosperity to the people of Lesotho.
Now at least 39 migrants dead in Mexico detention center fire. A fire started by migrants protesting against their expected deportation killed at least 39 people at a Mexican detention center near the U.S. border, authorities said on Tuesday. The blaze broke out shortly before midnight at the National Migration Institute facility in Ciudad Juarez, prompting the mobilization of firefighters and dozens of ambulances. An AFP journalist saw forensic personnel remove a dozen bodies from the INM's parking lot, where several other bodies were laid and covered with blankets. At least 39 immigrants were killed and 29 were injured, according to the INM, which said the center housed 68 adult males from Central and South America. The migrants started the blaze themselves during a demonstration after they found out that they would be deported, President Andrés Manuel López Obrador said. He told reporters they put mats at the door of the shelter and set them on fire as a protest and did not imagine that it would have caused this terrible tragedy. Numerous migrants have been detained in the facility in recent days after local authorities rounded up street vendors, some of whom were foreigners from the area. A Venezuelan woman who gave her name as Viangli stood outside the immigration center, desperate for information about her 27-year-old husband who had been detained there. Ciudad Juarez, which neighbors El Paso, Texas, is one of the border towns where numerous undocumented migrants seeking refuge in the United States remain stranded. Fed up with the wait, hundreds of them attempted to storm an international bridge on the 13th of March, but were blocked by U.S. agents.
Oscar Pistorius up for parole in girlfriend's murder case. South African Paralympic champion Oscar Pistorius might be released from prison this week, a decade after he killed his girlfriend in a crime that gripped the world. A parole board is to decide whether Pistorius should be let out early after a hearing in Pretoria on Friday. The board must determine whether the purpose of imprisonment has been served, said Department of Correctional Services spokesman Singabako Ngumalo. Pistorius, who is now 36, shot dead River Steenkamp, a model, in the early hours of Valentine's Day in 2013 when he fired 4 times through the bathroom door of his ultra-secure Pretoria house. He pleaded not guilty and denied that he killed Steenkamp in a rage, saying he mistook her for a burglar. Known worldwide as the Blade Runner because of his carbon fiber prosthetics, he was sentenced to 13 years behind bars. Offenders in South Africa are automatically eligible for parole consideration after serving half of their sentence. Pistorius has served more than half, having started his term in 2014. As part of his rehabilitation, Pistorius met Steenkamp's parents, June and Barry, last year, and a process authorities said aims to ensure inmates acknowledge the harm they've caused to their victims and the society at large. River's mother, June, will attend the hearing to make representations to the parole board, which will include both parents' victim impact statements, said Tanya Kwon, a lawyer representing the Steenkamps. June's husband, Barry, is unable to travel due to ill health, Kwon added. Kwon said she was not at liberty to discuss the Steenkamp's position on a possible release of their daughter's killer.
Getting into our next story, Kenyan MP dies after hit-and-run motorcycle crash. A Kenyan lawmaker has died while receiving treatment at a hospital after being involved in a hit-and-run motorcycle accident in the capital, Nairobi. Kolo Malim Hassan was a second-term MP for Banisa constituency in northeastern Kenya. His family told local outlets that the MP was hit on Saturday by a speeding motorcycle rider. He was pronounced dead on Tuesday night. Lawmakers have been paying tribute to their colleague on social media. Malim was a dedicated and committed public servant, said Kimani Ichung'wa, the majority leader in parliament. Kolo was a good person and particularly dedicated to his oversight as well as other parliamentary duties, said Kibwezi West Prime Minister Wengi Mutuse.
In our next story, outgoing Nigeria government proposes pay rises after fuel subsidy removal. Nigeria's outgoing government has recommended that the new administration of President-elect Bola Tinubu give public sector workers pay rises after removing a fuel subsidy in June, Labour Minister Chris Nginge said on Tuesday. President Muhammadu Buhari, who steps down in May, had planned to remove the popular but costly subsidy in 2022 as part of fiscal and petroleum sector reforms, but abandoned the plan because of fears of protests in the run-up to last month's election. Previous Nigerian governments have promised to remove the fuel subsidy, which most economists say is an unsustainable drag on public finances, but have failed to do so because of fierce opposition from citizens. Many Nigerians regard cheap subsidized fuel as at least one benefit they receive from the state, which fails to deliver other basic services such as electricity and security despite receiving billions of dollars every year from oil exports. We have already concluded on the issue of pay rise. We recommended 5% and 10% pay rise for workers in different categories, Ginge said. While the new government is not obliged to act on their recommendation, the call does put pressure on Tinubu to fulfill his campaign promise to remove the subsidy. Even though the outgoing administration itself failed to do so, Tinubu, who is from the same party as Buhari, also promised during his presidential election campaign to ramp up oil production and deregulate midstream gas prices within 6 months.
And now bringing us to the end of our top stories, Malawi is still in dire situation after Cyclone Freddy. Malawi's information minister says the situation in the country is still dire 2 weeks after Storm Freddy left a trail of devastation in the southern region. Moses Kunyuku told the BBC Newsday program that the death toll had risen to over 600 and many displaced people were still living in camps that provide shelter and food. He said roads and dozens of bridges had been washed away by floods, making it difficult to provide desperately needed aid. The minister said there was a risk of outbreaks of waterborne diseases in the camps due to congestion. He said there was a crisis in the health and education sector in the areas affected by the storm. Repair works on electricity lines damaged by a previous cyclone was still unfinished, and many areas are currently without power. So even the health sector is now overwhelmed as well. Education centers also remain affected because most of the camps that have been created are at schools, he said. He said with schools reopening, the government was having to make a tough decision to move the displaced people from the schools to tents that will serve as as temporary shelters. He also noted that at least 500 schools had been damaged by the storm. The minister has appealed for more humanitarian assistance. Storm Freddy struck Mozambique and Malawi earlier in March for the second time in a month, destroying scores of homes and triggering widespread floods.
After the break, we take a look at one of the greatest conservation successes in the SADC region.
NMH at 1 brings you news from all across Namibia. If you would like to feature your brand or campaign on this platform, contact nmh1@synergy.com.na. NMH at 1, your lunchtime news companion. The Southern African Development Community aims to showcase lessons learned over 20 years of transfrontier conservation areas development. We'll watch the following video to learn more about TFCAs as one of the greatest conservation successes in the SADC region.
Ubambisana kwethu njenge-imazi uma sibambisana ngeveli umqoka ukuthi sonke sihlangane sibefana naleli langa nathi esikulo ngoba lilanga libalinye yabona nani lesilibukako.
In the Southern African Development Community, countries have come together to develop trans-frontier conservation areas with a dream to connect Africa's natural and cultural resources, improve socio-economic development, and promote regional peace and stability. The pioneers that first believed in the goals of TFCAs and subsequently the reason they invested in them was that country borders and protected area boundaries can be an obstacle for wildlife to move.
Wildlife normally moves freely. It doesn't recognize the international boundaries that humans create.
Jive na mahitiro arukuruhite joro kukabira Zambia, joro kukabira Angola, joro kukabira kwikonje omushakira manje.
Their movement is dictated by the natural rhythm, the flooding patterns, for example, and where they breed, and where they can find the best food for the young ones and for the entire population at a specific time.
As tartarugas, elas não sabem onde elas vivem ou o quê. Basta elas nascerem, lançam-se ao mar, o mar é vasto.
The concept of the transfrontier is free movement of communities as well as the wildlife.
TFCAs bring together various land use practices consistent under one shared conservation objective, all whilst fostering a healthy relationship with the communities living in and adjacent to TFCAs.
In any discussions, local people, to me, they are important to be involved because these are the people who knows what is happening within the TFCAs. They are the ones who need also to benefit from these TFCAs.
Through TFCAs and the establishment of animal migration corridors, ancient migration routes can be conserved.
The African elephant population migrated between the countries for decades. They have no idea of man-made structures and why they were put there.
From Kavango, Zambezi, known as Kaza TFCA, home to the largest contiguous transboundary elephant population in the world, to the loggerhead turtles that come ashore in the Lubombo TFCA. This vast network of collaborating countries is a triumph for the ideals of conservation. The idea was first implemented between Botswana and South Africa with the establishment of the Kalahari Transfrontier Park in 1999. Today, there are 18 transfrontier conservation areas that have been successfully set up across 16 SADC member states. Where conflict existed between people and wildlife previously, there have been effective ongoing programs established that are helping preserve and keep the balance between people and the wildlife that surrounds them. At the heart of this has been the value of local cultures and the socio-economic benefits that come with amplifying local communities.
Those people who stay close or adjacent to the national parks, they face a lot of challenges.
Conservation is a big problem if it leaves out the stakeholders.
Nowadays, when the community look at us, they look at us as partners, because at the end of the day, we are protecting them from being attacked from wildlife and protecting their revenue where they get the income from.
Conservation farming kia vuto kwa hulu kwa ne kulaka ni amuhochero ni balimi ka vufela kakalikani kakona kurufa kutulo yetuna
kuna ni chinjo nyana ese eliten akuri alukata farm tawa ya litapino sifera.
So farmers are excited, they are not stranded, people have money, children are going to school.
Kuba naleli bandla la TFCA basifundzise sina 4 students ema-hospitality labahambe bayofundzela bacecesha sebayawati ke lo msebenzi nabo ke sebafundzisa labanye.
The establishment of transfrontier conservation areas is a leading example of what is possible when countries work together.
Let's take a look at the weather predictions for Southern Africa before we get into our economic news. Let's get into our economic news. Tanzania's aviation industry performance surpasses pre-COVID levels. The year 2022 ended on a high note for the aviation sector as passenger traffic and cargo surpassed the pre-COVID levels. Tanzania Civil Aviation Authority data show that cargo handled last year surpassed the pre-pandemic levels by 32% to reach 35,130.83 tons, while passengers carried by airlines increased by almost 2% to hit 5.723 million. When it comes to aircraft movement, they still remain below pre-pandemic level by 15.4% when comparing the 2022 figures with those of the preceding year. The number of passengers who use the country's airports jumped by 49.23% compared to 3.835 million registered in 2021, according to the TCAA.
South African consumers surviving on credit in cost of living crisis. Another report has confirmed that South African consumers are living on credit to survive the cost of living crisis. Challenging economic conditions are causing debt balances to climb, although consumers are trying to pay off their debts sooner. According to the latest TransUnion Q4 2022 South Africa Industry Insights report, total outstanding balances and new account originations were higher year over year across most consumer lending categories as consumers tried to access greater liquidity to finance increased cost of living expenses. Now, this is happening against a backdrop of continued challenging macroeconomic conditions, with gross domestic product down 1.3% in the fourth quarter of 2022 and the consumer price index in December increasing by 7.2%, one over the year before. Consumer appetite for new credit cards continued to increase towards the end of 2022, with card originations increasing by 40.1% compared to the fourth quarter of 2021, growing for the sixth consecutive quarter.
Let's take a look at the economic indicators before we get into your sports news.
Good day everyone, time for international sports news, starting off with soccer news. It is Euro 24 Germany qualifying that continues, lots of internationals being played, and it is qualifying for the 2024 tournament. Big result for Scotland. Scotland beat Spain by 2-0. That game was played in Hampden Park and that was in Glasgow, and it is significant for Scotland because it's the first time in 39 years that they beat Spain in a soccer game. And the hero there was Scott McTominay. He is from Scotland. He scored 2 goals for Scotland in that win against Spain. So lots of work to be done for Scotland to go through to the Germany 2024. 16th of June they play against Norway away and then home against Georgia. But the result against Spain, a big advantage for them going forward. Other games that was played, Georgia and Norway played 1-1 draw, and then Croatia beat Turkey. That game was played in Turkey. The score there was 2-0, and then Switzerland too strong for Israel. They played at home Switzerland. The score there was 3-0. Continuing with tennis news, Miami Open that is in the second week, and it was quarterfinals of the women's side of the draw. Jessica Pegula, number 3 seed of the USA, a tough game for her, but she's through to the semi-final. She beat Anastasia Potapova from Russia in 3 sets. It was 4-6, 6-3 and 7-6. Also, the number 10 seed, Elena Rybakina, she's also through to the semi-final. She beat Martina Trevisan of Italy, 6-3 and 6-love. She continues with a good form. She won the Indianapolis, or the Indian Welsh a few weeks ago. On the men's side of the draw, Daniel Medvedev, number 4 seed, he's through. That was a round of 16 game. He beat Quentin Halys of France 6-4, 6-2. And then number 1 seed, Carlos Alcaraz, also through to the quarterfinals, beating Taylor Paul by 6-4, 6-4. And now he will play another American, and that is Taylor Fritz, number 9 seed. A tough game coming up for Carlos Alcaraz. It was Fritz that beat Helga Rune by 6-3 and 6-4. Continuing international sports news with golf news, it is the next tournament on the PGA is the Valero Texas Open being played at the TPC at San Antonio. Also important tournament for the pros. It starts on Thursday, but the winner of this tournament gets an invitation to the first major of the year, the Masters, that starts next week on the 6th of April. The winner of the tournament qualify, if not qualified before, and also in the tournament of the Masters next week, significantly will be 18 players of the Live Golf Breakaway League of Greg Norman. They banned from the PGA, but they can play in the majors, and many of them qualified because of being previous winners. Players like Sergio Garcia, Dustin Johnson, Patrick Reed and Phil Mickelson, previous winners, and also players to watch will be world number 4, that is Cameron Smith, and also Bryson DeChambeau, and then also Charles Schwartzel of South Africa. He's a previous winner in 2011. He qualifies, and also Louis Oosthuizen, because he was in the top 50 when invitations were sent out. So that's the Masters starting next week, Thursday at Augusta. Closing off with cricket news, and it's the West Indies that won the second T20 international at the Wanderers against the South African Proteas by 7 runs. It was the West Indies that batted first, 220 for 8 in their 20 overs, and South Africa 213 for the loss of 6 wickets. Important few 50 over one-day games coming up for South Africa. They play against the Netherlands starting on Friday. That will be in Benoni at Willowmore Park. It's a day-night game starting at 1 p.m. on Friday. South Africa need to win both the 50 over internationals. That is to qualify for the World Cup, 50 over World Cup later this year in India, October and November that will be. That's international sports news for today. Hope you have a great sport day, and we talk again tomorrow. Goodbye.
You're watching Africa Good Morning. If you're just joining us, let's take a look at the highlights from today's broadcast. Lesotho MPs to discuss reclaiming parts of South Africa. At least 39 migrants dead in Mexico detention center fire. Oscar Pistorius up for parole in girlfriend's murder case. Tanzania's aviation industry performance surpasses pre-COVID levels.
And with that, we've come to the end of our broadcast. Do remember that Africa Good Morning is repeated on our Oneuptwo website, our DSTV channel 285 and our GoTV channel 94 between 8:30 and 9 a.m. every weekday. I am Glen Rashipura.
And I am Diana Master. Until tomorrow, wishing you a lovely day ahead.